Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the first European Identity Conference here in Munich. I hope most of you got to bed early enough last night. We actually have a pretty good showing here, so nobody overslept. The good thing is there isn't really all that much to do in Munich at night. Dick Hart was asking me a couple of days ago where the action was, you know. Action as in girls and alcohol and, you know, things like that. And I said, well, I honestly don't know. I don't think we have that here. So no real danger of people overexposing themselves to activities like that. So instead, what we're going to do is talk today about various aspects of the business of identity. And I would like to start out with my presentation as soon as the people here from the technical department get it up and running. The question is not only, why are we here so early? Well, that's easy to answer because we have lots to talk about and lots of people to listen to today and lots of discussions to have. But the other question is, why are we here at all? Well, each of you has a different reason for attending this conference. In a very, very primitive way, I could probably say there are three basic groups of people here in the room today. There are vendors, there are exhibitors, and there are users. The vendors are here because they want to present their company and their competencies to as many potential customers as possible. They're here because they want to gain insight about trends and innovations. They are expecting thought leadership from a conference like this, and I think you came to the right place. For some reason, the machine has a life of its own. Talk about identity, it even has life. Exhibitors, of course, want to showcase their products. They want to generate leads. Users want to find solutions to existing problems. All of you are here because of business. You are not here for the heck of it. I will admit the beer is great in Munich, and yes, you can have fun. Even Germans can loosen up occasionally, as they proved during the summer soccer world championship. You wouldn't recognize them. You know, this was a completely different country than the one I've been living in for 40 years. People actually partying and running around on the street. And of course, what we're here for is the business of business. We are here because many of you are looking for business opportunities, and some of you are here because you would like to know what the business drivers are that are behind the identity and access management thing. And I have a slide that I prepared for you here, which tells you from the KCP perspective what we think the business drivers are. Basically, we have four things that we think are driving this industry. One is business need. We are all concerned as user companies in streamlining and perfecting our processes. We are desperately searching for ways to get closer to our markets. And in order to get closer to our markets, we need to be able to identify these markets. Companies are in search of operational efficiency. They're trying to make their users more productive. They're trying to get more bang for the bucks, more out of the investment that they have to make in IT systems and identity systems. They are looking, as every business constantly is looking, for cost containment, cost cutting. They are exploring automation in many fields, be it from provisioning to compliance to whatever, because they think that is a way to cut out the fat. And they are forced to consider compliance as a major factor, a major investment driver, because the thumb screws are being tightened. Regulators all over the world are demanding more and more transparency from IT systems as well, because where do business processes happen today? They happen on IT systems. If you can't prove who did what, when on your systems, you might have the situation of watching your boss getting let off in handcuffs, because increasingly regulators are making the boss man liable for what happens in his company. And we have seen people standing in the dock who used to stand on stages and give big presentations like this at this conference. You can see a fifth driver that is sort of hidden behind the four others here. I'm sure that the people from the IT security field would dispute this view, but we at KCP sort of feel that security is not really the big driver for identity and access management. It's kind of a necessity. Unfortunately, many in this field tend to use security as a kind of a cudgel to bludgeon their customers, sort of, like a scare them and they'll buy philosophy. It hasn't worked in the past, and I don't really understand why vendors persist in using this strategy. It is just something that customers do not really want to face up to. It's kind of, yes, hiding under the bed covers so the monster won't get you, but no, you can't really get C-level people very interested in security topics, at least not in Germany, and I assume in other countries neither. Sometimes you get real serious business people who turn into gamblers as far as the IT security problem goes. We're analysts, and we tend to create very complicated charts just to show how much we know about the subject. So here's the analyst chart for this presentation. This is a different view of identity management business drivers. And if you look at each of these, you will discover topics that will be covered during this conference. Things like compliance, like the extended enterprise, reaching out and touching your vendors, your suppliers, your customers, your partners. Things like total customer experience, which is a big buzzword. You want to really get the people enthused about things that you're doing. You want transparency and cost reduction, security, usability, service orientation. These are the typical analyst buzzwords. Of course, none of them really answers the basic question, which is in the minds of the people that are thinking about investing in identity management. The basic question, the big one, is why do I need identity management anyway? Well, the answer is because customers have a problem. And yes, this graph does, in fact, address all of these problems. But of course, behind each of these buzzwords, there lies a question that customers are asking, like compliance and governance. The question here is, how do I get my auditors to sign off on my annual statement? Yesterday, we saw this wonderful slide of the, 600,000 SAP users and accounts, and the seal of the auditor superimposed on that. I mean, which auditor in his right mind is going to sign off on an annual statement when the company can't prove that they are in fact compliant in their IT systems? I mean, that's kamikaze. That's, the guy could be liable. So what's he going to do? He's going to spend lots and lots of build hours pouring over your IT logs and books and whatnot. And maybe, yes, he will sign off in the end, but it's going to cost. Take another one, the extended enterprise, this reaching out thing. Actually, what are we asking here? How can partners and customers not only access my network, but how can they access my network safely and productively? That is a very different question than just the one of how do I connect. We talk about the total customer experience, but the question in the mind of the customer is, the client, how can I create lots of return customers? I want these people to come back. As they say in Germany, I want their best, and as much of it as I can get. Transparency and cost reduction. The question, of course, here is, am I actually pouring money down the hole? As we all know, we could probably save half of our investment in IT security and identity management if we knew which half. Security. How do I keep the bad guys out and the good guys in? That's the question. Not how do I create walls around my company. Usability. The question might be here, how do I make my users more comfortable and thus more efficient? Yes, of course, I care about my employees. I would like to make them comfortable, but not just for their own sake. I want them to do a better job. Service. How do I create secure applications faster and cheaper? That would be one very interesting question that I would ask. So yes, the identity management space has lots of business drivers, and each one poses questions. And I think that if we look at it correctly, identity management can answer all of these questions. It's just a matter of finding the right answers. Maybe one way to find answers is to try and set yourself in the position of those you're trying to sell to. My advice always is try to look at it like a customer. And what does a customer really want? I mean, let's go to basics here. The customer wants to do business because the business of business is business, as we all know. Unfortunately, most of our business is now run by computers. So, yes, we have to be concerned about security, but we don't like to talk about or even think about security. We don't only have to implement security, we have to prove that we did. So, we have to demonstrate compliance. This is a subject that the boss will be much more interested in talking about with you than IT security, because here it's his ass on the line. That is a very major motivation force. If you take identity management products and tools and try to assign them sort of a position in this very, very simple chart, I think we start approaching what could be a business-oriented argument for identity management. Directories. I mean, what are directories? They tell us who's doing what in the company. It's an essential tool of business. It gives us transparency. It enables processes. We increasingly need web service security tools, which identity management vendors offer, because we are reaching out beyond the borders of our company and trying to do business over the insecure web. So yes, identity management can help us do this. We are talking here at the conference about federation, which is something that directly impacts business. We are talking about, well, we aren't actually talking about RFID. We were thinking about adding a panel on that, but we decided that RFID is sort of a subject that whose time has been coming for quite a while, and at least in Germany, we are still sort of waiting for it to happen in a big way. Maybe next year we'll do a big RFID panel. But yes, creating the Internet of Things is a big concern, and identity management is the key. We are talking here at the conference about mobile identity, because that is a subject that really is getting momentum right now with all these gadgets we carry around with us, which are not really identifiable. Yes, I have to type in a 4-letter PIN number on my mobile phone, but is that really identity management? No, not really. So before we don't think of something else, I'm not going to use my mobile phone as an electronic wallet. We were talking about role management, which on the one hand deals with business. It enables processes, but on the other hand, it also has implications in the area of IT security, because that way we at least know who is allowed to do what. We have things like provisioning, which was the subject of our early bird this morning. All of you who were still asleep at 7, I can say it was a very, very rewarding discussion that we had about what constitutes next generation provisioning. Yes, it's becoming essential to everything we do in our businesses, because it automates and helps us create secure and reliable systems. Smart cards are a very hot topic. We will be hearing more about that in the conference. A way to authenticate securely and easily to our systems and thus enable the systems. Yes, it's security, but it is also business. Password management, same thing. SSO, I would say, is sort of password management on the business side. It helps to enable and make people more productive. We have deprovisioning, which some in the identity brand industry would maintain is the first step to identity management, because that way you can sort of do your housekeeping, clean up cut out all the dead wood, give back all the unused software licenses, save enough money through the deprovisioning process to pay for all the rest of your identity management projects. I know that's a very daring vision, but essentially there's some truth to it. Strong authentication, yes, it's an IT security issue, but one that has direct implications to everything else. Auditing, of course, is deeply compliance-oriented. We have to be able to prove to our auditors what we have done. And compliance automation, of course, makes auditing possible without having to tie up half the resources of your company just to get your annual statement signed off. You can look at it not only like a customer, you can look at it like a user. What do users really want? Well, one thing is they want to seamlessly surf the net. They don't want to keep constantly being asked to re-enter passwords and usernames. They want to enjoy just surfing around instead of constantly being annoyed and interrupted. They want, this is very deeply related to the first, an end to what we have been referring to here in the last days as identity chaos. This is my friend Helmut Broda. He uses this slide in his presentations to demonstrate the chaos in his wallet. I mean, these are all digital identities in some form or the other. Of course, they're somehow embedded now in plastic. There are numbers on there that he has to enter somewhere, or there are magnet strips on there, or RFID chips. But he has to carry each of these around just to prove who he is to the various relying authorities and parties with whom he deals. He has, of course, the same chaos probably on his computer every time he accesses any of the websites. Users want an end to this. They're fed up with it. It's our job in the identity industry to solve this problem for them. A user would like better service, and the best way to serve someone is to know what he wants. So identity management is an opportunity here for vendors and for offers of products and services to offer better service to these customers by personalization, by identifying needs and wishes. But on the other hand, we don't want you to know too much about us because we, as users, would like to have privacy and security. There is a word in German that has a very, very deep connotation in both legal and ethical context. Informationelle Selbstbestimmung, informational self-determination, the right of each individual to govern his own identity and to know what is done with this identity. This is very deeply embedded in the German Datenschutz laws, the data protection laws, and is considered a very, very important human right. On the other hand, we have people like this gentleman here, from whom I would hesitate to buy a used car. You can actually see him, reaching out to grab the information on your electronic passport. This is the German Interior Minister, by the way, Mr. Schäuble, who would like for the police to be able to directly access the photos and fingerprints on our electronic documents without having to go through any formal process of asking anyone or something like that. The idea is to, since we're all networked, very simple for some policeman somewhere to just, access the data on the passport registration data file. This is, of course, something that is very efficient, and that's the argument of the government here. Saves government money and makes people safer. There are those in Germany who think that what this will lead to is that we will all be inmates in a very, very well-run prison. Thankfully, we are having a real serious debate about this, and in fact, Mr. Schäuble has been forced to backpedal on this one. He'll try again, I'm sure, and who knows what will come of it. But at least, and that is the good news, I think, people are awakening to the fact in Germany that digital identity is, in fact, something that deserves protection and that deserves a serious debate about who is allowed to do what. One aspect of the debate that I have not heard of yet, and I think the identity industry has a huge opportunity here, would be to offer as a solution to problems like this. The policeman wants to access the data because he wants to catch crooks. But on the other hand, we don't want him to access innocent people's data because that would make us all potential suspects. So why don't we think about federation, not so much as just a technology, but maybe as a principle, a governing principle that would work on a state level. Germany prides itself in the title of the Federal Republic of Germany. Federation is very deeply baked into the culture of the German state. Each one of the 16 states is an autonomous republic in its own right, and we have very, very serious debates about who is allowed to do what on the state level and what is the federal government allowed to do. And we are constantly creating compromises and systems that somehow seem to work quite well. Well, why don't we offer, as an industry, identity federation as a solution to this law enforcement problem? I could very well imagine a federated system on the German level, with police being allowed to be members of a circle of trust, but one that is transparent, that is auditable. Of course, the police don't want us to know that they are actually investigating us. I can understand this. You don't want the criminal to know the police are already on his tail. But why don't we have something like, say, an ombudsman system, where at least someone knows the police is investigating, and if some question were to arise later on about the legality of this, this would be traceable. Federation, in the way that we in the identity industry view it, I think would be a very, very good suggestion to make. Unfortunately, we don't hear very much about that in Germany. So yes, that is a big business opportunity for our industry, e-government. Another one, of course, is e-security. But I think we're going to have to reconsider what we are talking about when we talk about e-security. And one hint of where we may be going was given to me last year at Digital ID World in Santa Clara. It was very unusual, I thought, at the time, for the CTO of Symantec, a security company, to stand up and give a speech on the first day of Digital ID World. And this was the identity people talking here, and suddenly you had someone from security up there in a very honored position. I know, of course, why, because Clyde was talking about something that is very, very deeply connected with the identity subject. The subject of his talk was the end of the perimeter defense. Firewalls are dead. That was essentially what this guy who earns lots of money selling firewalls was telling us. You see, this is the old model of IT security in the networked world. There are us in the company, and then there's a firewall protecting the company from all those guys out there who are potentially dangerous. And not me, Clyde, Symantec, was giving the message that this is an obsolete model. What will happen, that was the gist of his talk, was, yes, we will still protect the data center. We probably will have a firewall in front of that, but it will be a smaller firewall. We won't have to spend all this money building this huge wall around our companies. Instead, we will just consider that everyone out there is potentially dangerous. Out there means outside the data center. It could be the guy in the office next door, or it could be the guy in the internet cafe in Bangalore. Everyone out there should be handled in the same way, but to do that, of course, we will have to know who are these people. What are they allowed to do? We'll have to create client security, client identity to manage this. But that, according to Symantec, is the direction that e-security is heading. So it's heading our way. We in the identity field stand to profit from this. The identity industry will make substantial amounts of money if they do it correctly through e-mobility systems. E-mobility as in, I will use my mobile phone. That's funny, by the way. The Germans use an English word, handy, to describe a mobile phone that Americans do not use. It's an English word, but we don't use it. E-mobility, in this case, would involve me being able to present my, at the point of sale, ask to be billed to my mobile phone. Great idea, because we always have our mobile phone with us. Unfortunately, we only have a 4-digit PIN number that is protecting us, and that is not enough. We will have to see many more mobile phones with things like fingerprint readers on them or other forms of strong authentication before this will actually come to happen. But we're getting there. We are seeing more and more of these phones appear. Someone is going to have to find a solution to this to make sure that the gadget is actually correctly identified with the user. If we manage to get this to happen, then lots and lots of money can be made. So my bet is that someone of us is going to find a solution to this problem. Once we know exactly who is sort of, attached to the phone, we can start offering very, very interesting services, such as the oft-touted location-based services. We've been talking about them for years, but they don't seem to be happening the way that the service providers envisioned. But of course, if we really know who the guy is and where he is, we can do wonderful things, like I type in, I'm hungry, or pizza, and the mobile phone says, well, there's Ponte Vecchio up the street here. Another aspect of e-mobility would be in the automotive field. We will have a panel on identity and automotive later on. The question that, for some reason, I have never been satisfactorily answered for me is, how is it still possible to steal a car? Cars are stolen every day in Germany, hundreds of them, and they sort of disappear, mostly in an easterly direction, some under their own power, some not, as we can see here. But they're gone. How can a car disappear? I mean, it's a huge piece of machinery. Why don't we have systems in place that actually, automatically inform us that the car has been stolen and where it's going? Someone's going to have to find a solution to this, and the guy that does is probably going to make quite a bit of money. So why don't we look at that? Another business opportunity in mobility is being demonstrated right now, Twitter. Okay, we don't have it in Germany to that extent yet, but it's an interesting business concept. It's a business model based on the question, what are you doing? I mean, honestly, what is the most often asked question in a conversation between people using mobile phones? Well, the first thing you ask is, where are you? I don't know why. We spend lots of money asking this question and don't really get good answers, but Twitter is offering very nice answers. They're actually bringing people together based on their location, and the phone here is the key to all this. So yes, you can build very, very interesting business models by identifying people on the move. So let's do it. In fact, the opportunities are going to grow exponentially in the next couple of years because everybody is cutting off the wires. Wireless is the big thing. The Economist in the last weekly edition had a title story entitled "When Everything Connects, What Will Change Then?" And this graph that you can see here is a projection how many wireless devices will be used over the next few years. Shipments in million, between 300 and 400 million. Each one of these gadgets will require identity, and these identities will require management. There are opportunities out there. Let's grab them. Of course, unfortunately, there are also problems out there, and one that the Economist was talking about and that we have to take very seriously, they described as today's laws often assume that privacy is guaranteed by a pact between the consumer and the company, or the citizen and the state. That's a sort of a one-to-one relationship. But in a world where many networks interconnect on the fly and information is widely shared, that will not work. So yes, there remains quite a bit of work to be done before wireless identity will fly. And of course, the greatest business opportunity of all for this industry is business. Call it e-business if you want. Phil Windley, in his book Digital Identity, described very well, and he used a term that we at KCP have been using for a couple of years now, the goal being business-driven identity management. And his way of describing it was, in addition to identifying customers in order to sell them services, business have an increased need to identify employees, systems, resources, services in a systematic way to create business agility and to ensure the security of business assets. On the other hand, there are those that would maintain that things like OpenID are a threat. And Johannes Ernst, with whom I've been in email contact preparing this conference, sent me a couple of mails that were posted to one of his blogs. By the way, this photo, Johannes, is horrible, but it's the only one I have. Maybe you're in the room, I believe. Why don't you stand up so that people know what you really look like? There he is. Yeah. He's much more handsome than he looks on this photo. So this gentleman with whom Johannes was communicating was very worried about OpenID because he said, if you give the people the right to control their own ID, they probably won't give me any information anymore. But his point was, as a business, you want to capture contact data on your web visitors. It's key to your CRM strategies. And the threat would be that by allowing your visitors to bring their OpenID instead of having to sign up, sites will get less data about them. And many sites' success depend on having that data. In the course of the discussion, Johannes essentially was saying, no, not so. Because user-centric identity puts the user in control, the user can feel more confident in the relationship with the site. So what happens? You create a win-win situation, at least for those sites that take advantage of it. The implication here is that those that ignore OpenID do so at their peril, because people will like it. OpenID clearly requires some rethinking on what constitutes CRM. Yes. I don't have the answers to that yet, but I would encourage you all to think about it. That's what we're here for, to listen, to digest, to take home, think about it, and hopefully dream up solutions that will create business opportunities for all of us so that the business of identity can go on. Thank you very much.